Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, I'm Indriana VANTARI. I'm from class 5 TBIB. This is video for fulfill the final examination for the Historical of Islamic Education course. So, I will start by explaining the definition, function, scope, and periodization. Firstly, the definition of the historical of Islamic education comes from two, namely history and Islamic education. Thus, two things that can be separated. The word history comes from Arabic, namely death, sirah, and death science. In language, history means the terms of time, and in historical terms, is a situation and event that occurred in the past, and the event actually happened. Well, the definition of Islamic education comes from two, namely education and Islam. Education is an effort to change human attitudes towards maturity and become more well through teaching and practice. So, Islamic education is science of education based on Islamic teaching. Islamic education is the process of guidance from educators to direct students on changing attitudes that will manifest in deed and the formation of Muslim personality. The history of Islamic education has very important function in human life, especially for Muslims. Its main function is learning and provide direction to go better, provide inspiration to plan ahead by learning from past as not to make similar mistakes that have been experienced by generation formerly. Next is the scope of history of Islamic education includes object, history of Islam education, and methods of history of Islamic education. Next, we will discuss about the object of the history of Islamic education. Historical studies are usually seen from the perspective or view of fact or incident of civilization. So the object of history of Islamic education include fact and realities related to the growth and development of Islamic education, both formal and informal. Matter this is in line with the rule of Islam as religion that calls for the goodness and shunning evil to good life, but as a branch of science, the object of history Islamic education is generally not much different from in historical object education, such as regarding the characteristic it has. Education will have no meaning if humans are not in it. This is due to because humans are object and subject of education, meaning that humans will not develop their culture perfectly if there is no education. Thus, then we'll get what called all subject history. Next, methods of historical of Islamic education. The method that can be taken for the first phase are oral method, with this method of tracking historical object using interview. Next is the observation method. In this case, the historical object is directly observed. And C, the documentary method, in which this method seeks to study carefully and in depth any written records or document. The second phase is the writing methods to understand the historical of Islamic education. Regard and approach or method that can be taken is the integration between method, descriptive, comparative method, and synthesis analytic methods. Firstly, descriptive methods. Islamic teaching brought by Rasulullah, which are contained in the Quran, explained by As-Sunnah, especially those directly related to Islamic education that can be described and explained as is. In this way, that what is contained in Islamic education can be understood. Next is the comparative method. Is method that tries to compare the objective of related Islamic teaching, education, and education fact, the life and its development of Islam at certain time and place. With this method, it can be seen the similarities and differences that exist in the two things so that possible solution can be proposed for both if there is discrepancy. C. The synthesis analysis method is used to provide an analysis of the terms or nation given by Islamic teaching critically, so as to show the advantage and peculiarities Islamic education in time. With the synthesis method, conclusion can be obtained accurate and thorough discussion for the history of Islamic education. This method can also be utilized for the benefit of the process of inheritance and development of Islamic human culture. From the methods and objects above, there are several signs that can help obtain historical data accurate. Of course, we need supporting science that can strengthen the existence of history. The knowledge in it is basic knowledge: A. Paleography, knowledge of ancient writings; B. Diplomatic, the knowledge of investigating the date, place, and authenticity of written documents; C. Epigraphy, knowledge of writing and documents; D. Chronology, knowledge of the unity of time; and sigillography, the knowledge of seals used in ancient time. Next is heraldry, the knowledge of special signs in things. G. Numismatics, knowledge of currency and metals. And the last is genealogy, knowledge of the origin or nasabiyah of the subject. Next, we will discuss about periodization of the historical of Islamic education. In order to make it easier for someone to study and in studying Islamic history, including the history of Islamic culture, it is necessary to develop several views of experts on the periodization of the history of Islamic education in Indonesia. Education Islam is as old as the arrival of Islam in Indonesia, and of course it will not spread from historical Islam in general. That's why the historical periodization of Islamic education is in historical period Islam itself, so that Islamic education is basically carried out in an effort respond to the will of Islam at time and in the future, which is considered a need of life. The business that is on, if we examine in depth, is an effort to implement the content of the Al-Quran, especially the content in Surah Al-Alaq, verse 1 until 5. Harun Nasution broadly divides the history of Islamic into three periods, namely the period classic, medieval, and modern. The period of discussion about the trajectory or period of the history of education Islam as follows. The first period of fostering Islamic education, which took place during the time of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, more or less than 23 years since he received the first revelation until his death. Next, the period of the growth of Islamic education, which took place since the death of the Prophet Muhammad SAW until the end and the reign of the Umayyad. And 3. The glorious period of Islam, which lasts from the beginning of the Abbasid Dawla until its fall. Baghdad is characterized by the rapid development of science and culture of Islam. Fourth, the stage of educational decline, which lasts from the fall of Baghdad to the fall of Egypt by Napoleon Bonaparte around the 13th century AD, which was marked by weakness Islamic culture. And the last is the stage of renewal of Islamic education, which has been going on since the occupation of Egypt and Napoleon in the end of the 18th century AD to the present, which is marked by the inclusion of elements of modern education. Number 2. is described about the similarities and differences between history and historical science. The similarities, both of them discuss related history in the past, and differences, history is picture of the past of human and their surrounding as social beings, scientifically arranged and complete. History in it includes the sequence of facts of the time with interpretation and explanation that provide an understanding of something that has passed, while history is branch of science that researches and investigates systematically the entire development of society and human in the past and even with the intention to the critically assess all the result of his research to be further used. So it can be concluded that history focuses on the event, while historical science focuses on the science that deals with this event. 3. The style and practice of Patani Islamic education. So, in Patani, Thailand, there are two types of Islamic education institution, namely education institution, traditional and modern pondok. Firstly, traditional cottage pondok is the oldest traditional education institution in Patani. Historians estimate this institution has existed along with the spread of Islam in Patani. The existence of the cottage in Patani is not much different from the existence of other Islamic boarding schools in the archipelago, but in terms of background behind, the formation of the hut and its function. The practice students in southern Thailand are called name is notified into class level. Level of knowledge of person measured based on the book you read. Curriculum subject all focus on the study of religious science comes from classical books. Learning methods focus on the methods of learning the book through reading it properly and also good understand of the part of teacher. Administrative of management is not concerned, such as the age of the parent student, reports, diplomas or certificate and so forth. 2. Modern pondok Islamic education boarding school. This boarding school is an education institution as result of the transformation process from boarding school institution traditional to modern Islamic boarding school. All activities are regulated by the central Thailand government are to education in Yala province and in practice the education system is implemented from semicular dualism, namely religious education at the level of ibtidaiyah education, mutawasitah and thanawiyah, while general education is from junior high school and senior high school. And while teaching method can be grouped into three kind of methods, where each method has its own characteristic, namely surrogate methods, bendungan methods, and weton. 4. During the Umayyad dynasty, the pattern of education was decentralized. Scientific studies in this period centered in Damascus. The pattern of Islamic education in the period of the Umayyad dynasty has developed when compared to the Khulafa Rashidin era, which was marked by the splendor of scientific activities in the mosque and the development of kutab and literary assembly. So the place education in the dynasty period Umayyad are first kutab, a place to learn to write. Kutab is place for children, and pattern Islamic education in the Umayyad dynasty period learn to write and read, memorize Al-Quran, and learn the basic teaching of Islam. B. The mosque. After the children listen at the Kutab are finished, they continue their education to the next level medium, which is carried out in the mosque. Lesson taught include the Al-Quran, interpretation, hadith, and fiqh, literature, poetry, language, grammar, arithmetic, astrology, and others. C. Literary assemblies. Meeting halls prepared by the caliph, decorated with beautiful ornaments, reserved only for prominent writers and scholars. The similarities between Umayyad, Damascus, and Andalusia equation of Islamic education of the Umayyad dynasty of the Damascus and Andalusia varies progress with the development of science from the time to time. At the time, the development of science in the era of the Umayyad Daulah made Damascus the center student city. Many people founded the educational institution, and many who studied the study of the science of the religion, history, literature, philosophy, and gave birth to several historical figures. Likewise, during the reign of the Umayyad Daulah in Andalusia, science is getting more and more advanced from the time to time. Two dynasties of grandmothers common ancestor, the Umayyad dynasty came from the sons of Manaf's Abdu, namely Hashim and Abdu Shams. Differences in Islamic education of the Umayyad dynasty of Damascus and Andalusia. The founders are different. When the Umayyad Daulah first in Damascus was founded by Muawiyah bin Abu Sufyan, while the second Umayyad Daulah was founded by Abdurrahman Dahil. The government center different. When the Umayyad Daulah stood first, the center of government was set in Damascus. Whereas when the Umayyad Daulah was founded, the center of the government were moved to Andalusia. And 5. The learning models of NU, Muhammadiyah, and Al-Irsyad. The NU Islamic education models in the concept of education is manifestation of the religious, social, and cultural life of the Kiai. Thus, the pesantren, Nahdlatul Ulama, and Kiai as the center are always involved in forming society. Education NU has two essential characteristics. Firstly, al-ittimat ala-nafsi, or self-sufficient, and the last is fil ijtimaiyah, or social, meaning that it live with by the community. The basis of NU is an institution pesantren education that is managed to develop and pass on the teaching of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaah, with an emphasis on traditional education method in the form of repetition and memorization, standard source of religious teachings, and one of his very literary sources stand out is the Yellow Book. The madrasah or pesantren was founded by the community and financed by the community themselves. The distinction feature of the teaching of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaah or Aswaja, which becomes a line and struggle stem from the Al-Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, the decision of the previous scholar, and Qiyas, or case that are not yet in the Quran and Hadith, are equated by the problem which already has text because of the similarities of the field. Muhammadiyah Islamic education model. Muhammadiyah education model is more tends to the moral education system, or what is now better known with character-based education. From the beginning, Muhammadiyah education was longer based on standards with cognitive-based education. In practice, Muhammadiyah has holistic education character, which has integration with school, family, society, mutual support. This is basis of culture that build human growth and as a whole. which is ultimately able to create a culture of noble civilization. So, if in practice Muhammadiyah Islamic education focus on character education. In education Muhammadiyah Islam also established public school that combine the pesantren system with the Western education system. This school just doesn't teach that education characterized by Islam, but also general education. It is combination of curriculum and concept education, educational integration. And the last is Al-Irshad Islamic Educational Model. Al-Irshad applies the concept of deep educational psychology curriculum. Al-Irshad implement a modern curriculum in the sense that there is kind of curriculum specially made. Material and book are adjusted according to level and time learned student. In its operational learning activities are carried out systematically, sequentially starting from the beginning introduction to each book that will be studied up to the chapter closing. The method used is discussion, practice, lectures, and exemplary. Yeah, I think it's enough from me. Thanks for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.